In this lesson, I'm gonna go ahead and try to go and give a quick overview of what the tools in the toolbar do. Now, I'm not going to explain every single one in detail because if I were to do that, it will literally take hours or maybe days. Instead of that, I'm gonna go ahead and recommend you to go and experiment with each of the tools and try to find out on your own what they do. As I make more and more lessons, then their usage should become much more apparent. Like I mentioned in an earlier tutorial, it's better if you go ahead and learn the logic behind each tool than becoming a dictionary and knowing what each one does. Because quite honestly, even though I've been doing this for a while, I still don't know 100% every single function or thing that Photoshop can do. Now that I got that out of the way, I'm gonna go and give you a quick overview of what they do. First of all, this one right here is the Move tool. The Move tool is used to move layers and selections. By clicking in the options bar and selecting Auto Select, then Photoshop automatically selects whatever layer is on top. Next, this is the Rectangular Marquee tool. The Rectangular Marquee tool does rectangular selections, which then could be moved around with the Move tool. If you were to hold down your mouse over it, you're gonna get other options such as the Elliptical Marquee tool, which instead of doing rectangular selections, it makes circular. Next, we have the Lasso tool. The Lasso tool allows you to make free-handed selections, which then can be, once again, manipulated with the Move tool. There are other options that come with it, such as the Polygonal Lasso tool and the Magnetic Lasso tool. Their usage is going to be explained when I make the lesson about how to eliminate backgrounds. Next, this is the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool selects areas that are of similar color, which then could be moved around with, once again, the Move tool. This is especially useful if there are large areas of similar colors which need to be selected and eliminated or modified in some other way. The next tool is a Crop tool. The Crop tool does exactly that. It crops. By moving around your selection and pressing Enter or clicking up here on the check mark, then the photograph automatically gets cropped to whatever dimension you chose. If you're wondering how I'm restoring every change, it's very simple. I simply press Ctrl Z and it brings me back to a move that I just made. The next tool is the Eyedropper tool. What it does is it lets you select any color that you see in any picture, and then that color then gets added to this area right here, the foreground color, which then can be used to paint or whatever you need to do. The next set of tools are mostly used to modify pictures. The first one is called the Patch tool. The Patch tool is used to make small changes in, for example, if you have a dirty picture and you need to, say, fix some smudges or dirt or whatever, this tool is very useful in that respect. If you were to hold down your mouse button on top of it, then you'll see that there are many other options, and I recommend that you go ahead and play around with them. The next one is the Brush tool. The Brush tool is, of course, used to paint. But to say that that's all it does will be a gross understatement, because this tool, it has so many different uses that, honestly, it warrants its own tutorial. The next tool is the Clone tool. By right-clicking on any section, and that's exactly what I'm doing, I'm holding Alt, and actually it's left-clicking and Alt, I select an area which then will be cloned, just like the tool is called, into a different section. This is very useful if you are trying to fix a picture and, for example, get rid of somebody that's in the picture that you don't want. There are other options that are in there, such as the Pattern Stamp tool. Honestly, I haven't played around with it, so go ahead and maybe you can figure it out. Once I figure it out, I'll say something about it. But for the right now, I'm going to very briefly talk about the History tool. So every time that you do an action in Photoshop, that action gets recorded. What that means is that you are able to go back and undo history, as it were, and go back to any previous changes that you have made. And what this tool does, the History Brush tool, it allows you to, in a certain way, go to a certain point in which you were working on the picture and you would like to restore. Say, for example, that I were to turn this pimp Spider-Man into a black and white picture, and I just want some of the color to be on his suit. Well, by using the history brush tool, I'm able to do exactly that and not go around and doing any crazy stuff over it. The next one should be quite obvious. It's the erase tool, and it does exactly that. It erases. The next one is the paint bucket tool, and is used to paint large areas of one color. This is especially useful if you are trying to simply erase the background and set one color, or by making one selection using some of the selection tools and then simply painting over it. If you hold your mouse over it, it gives you the gradient tool, which again is also very useful in doing exactly that, spreading a gradient on whatever it is that you need it. The next one is the blur tool. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you get an idea of what it does. It should be self-explanatory. Blurs. So by going over a picture, it blurs it and it makes all the pixels blurry and make everything blend in together. A companion of these tools is the sharpen tool, and it does the opposite. It sharpens the picture. Maybe its usage is not that quite obvious to you in this video, but go ahead and play around with it and you're going to know exactly what it does. The next one is the smudge tool, and it does exactly that. It's dissimilar as if you were to pass your finger on top of a wet painting or something like that. This is a very useful tool when you are doing actual painting in Photoshop and not just photo editing. The next tool should be familiar to those that have done any sort of photography in real world and actually developed the film in, the darkroom. First of all, you have the dodge tool, and it simulates the dodging that you do when you are doing any photography in a darkroom. What it does is it lightens up the picture, so you can work on areas that have a lot of shadows and make them light. The opposite of this tool is the burn tool, and it does exactly that. It burns. It lets in more light into the picture, as it were, and it darkens the picture. This is especially useful if you're working on areas that have way too many highlights and you would like to bring them to a more acceptable value. The sponge tool, well, go ahead and play around with it. It sponges, I guess. I'm not going to claim I know everything about Photoshop either. The next tool is a very, very powerful one, and it's the pen tool. It allows you to make detailed selections, which then could either be turned into a vector shape or into a selection. And this is especially useful if you are trying to get rid of certain elements from the background and eliminate them and extract them, as I'm about to do right now. This will be talked about further later on. I'm not even going to mention these other tools that come with it. The next one is the type tool. And the type tool, again, should be painfully obvious. What it does is it adds text, which then can be edited, formatted in many other different ways. But for right now, that's all you need to know. You put text in it with it. The next two are, first of all, this is a vector tool that is used to make shapes. By holding your mouse over it, you get different options such as the rectangular tool, the round the rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, polygon tool, line tool, custom shape tool. This one right here allows you to modify and move around different aspects of it. First of all, this one allows you to move the entire shape, and this is called the, let me hover over it, path selection tool, and this one is a direct selection tool. And what it does is it lets you move around the tiny little control points on the vector shape so you can modify to your heart's content. The next two tools I'm not going to mention again. Again, don't think that this is a cop-out, but these are 3D option tools. As you may realize, Photoshop now allows you to do 3D editing at a low level, and these tools allow you to modify it. I'm not going to talk about these. Instead, I'm going to talk about these final two tools right here. First of all, this is the zoom tool, and of course allows you to zoom into the picture, get a detailed look at it, and then modify to whatever you need. By holding down Alt on a PC and then clicking, it allows you to zoom out and go back to the picture on its own size. See, it's now back to 100%. The hand tool, well, this is especially useful if you are very zoomed into the picture and you need to go to a different section and you don't want to go back and use the scroll bar right here and get to that part. Instead, well, first of all, you can click on the tool directly and move it around. Or a much more useful thing that you could do, you could either press H, which is its shortcut, and move it around, or even more efficiently, hold down spacebar, click, and drag the picture around and go to whatever area that you need to work on. Finally, I'm going to talk about these two palettes right here. They're not really tools, but they're just as helpful. This one right here is the foreground tool. It allows you to change the foreground color so that you may paint over it. The other one is the background one, which allows you to modify the background. By pressing the arrow right here, you can switch between colors. And by pressing on this black and white picture right here, this little icon, it goes back to the standard black and white. That could also easily be achieved by simply pressing D, which is a shortcut for that particular tool, and it turns it back into black and white. Watch. Put it back on red, press D, goes back to black and white. If I press X, it switches between those two colors. So that saves me clicking time from going back and forth between those tools if all I want to do is change the colors around. Well, that's it for the explanation of these very basic tools. I hope you learned something, and I hope you see some of my other lessons that I will be posting on this website. Hopefully you learned something and you'll be able to make out better compositions next time.